Hi, I'm Justin.
Also, I hate the way my voice sounds, so if you can do whatever Photoshop does to voices, make me sound awesome.
And this is my lovely friend,
The beauty in the eyes of the beholder, and it's just about getting into the seat of being the beholder.
Hayley.
I don't think you have to be particularly perceptive. I just think you have to look up.
This podcast is mostly just her telling me stories.
If you expose yourself to the possibility that this might be really awkward, there can be something just really cool on the other side of it.
She thinks that her life and way of looking at things are
Oh, I was kind of waiting on you. I thought you were getting your stuff ready. You're waiting on me?
pretty normal.
You got to edit out all the misinformation about the Amish.
Maybe you can relate.
I would like a chance to re-sing the Amish Paradise.
If you want lighthearted stories
All right, you want to talk about goats?
and stream of consciousness,
I just woke up and needed some friends, and so I bought them.
then you're going to like the Sunny Side Up podcast.
Sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up.
So, if you're at all like me, you may feel that you're living in a world that can be a bit overwhelming and confusing at times. I'm also a huge fan of podcasts, documentaries, docudramas, stories, and of just information in general. Between all of that and the social media and news, sometimes our brains can feel like they're on overload. Hayley and I hope that this podcast can be something of an antidote to all of that. Like little jello shots of joy and distraction. None of it is too serious or really too informative. Mostly it's just two friends who have conversational chemistry talking about whatever enters the minds of relatively ADHD people. We hope you enjoy. I remember when I was young, and it was like one of the few really vivid memories when I was a kid in Chicago, and my dad was friends with this guy named Steve who owned a mechanic shop somewhere like in downtown Chicago. And it was like we lived in the suburbs, which was, kind of what you'd imagine, relatively idyllic and peaceful in the suburbs. So anyways, wherever Steve's shop was like greasy and noisy, and it was downtown Chicago, or at least that's how I remember it. It was like
Right.
rough and weird and wild and just, it was exotic. And it was, to a young boy, it was like, I don't know, there was something, there was a romance to it, because there was just like cars torn apart from like one end to the other in different rooms with, books of like all the different ways you could fix cars and all these weird machines and these lifts, and there's grease pits and, anyways. And as a side note, like Steve.
That is the most enthusiasm I have ever heard.
Yeah, it was
for car garages.
I know.
I love that.
I don't know why it stuck out, but Steve was this character. Even before I get to my story of like how it relates back to what you were just talking about, the bad parts, but him and this guy, there was another like auto shop sort of diagonally across the street from him. And at night, sometimes for fun, they would shoot bottle rockets at each other. So they had made like a metal pipe, like a T-shaped metal pipe, and they would, set the bottle rocket, light it, and shoot it across like a busy Chicago street. And you'd get like 3 or 4 of them off, and then you'd have to stop because, of course, the police would come. It was this, right. It was just fun. Anywho, here's where we're gonna dovetail into like, why did Justin tell us this story? So, Steve said there was this unit, a special unit for the police that would go into Cabrini Green. And if you've ever heard of Cabrini Green, okay, it was like this. The way I remember it was government housing. What do they call government housing in like inner city government housing?
Like Section 8?
Like a Section 8 projects, whatever the thing is, that's what it was. And it became legendary, I think, during the 80s, which is when I would have been there. But anyways, like awful. Like just like you talk about Wild West. So anyways, there was a special unit of police. And what they had done is they had refurbished a bread van. Like a bread truck. And they would go in with full body armor. And all they would do is they would drive the streets at around 5 or 6 in the morning. So just the first crack of daylight, all the people were now asleep. And they would just look for the visible bodies and then throw them in the back of this bread truck. and dispose of them, like little to no investigation, like just dispose of the bodies into like whatever a city's like, like their version of a big hole.
Right.
And just be done with it. But like
chicken pit.
Yeah, chicken pit. Like no investigation, no nothing. But they were like, it was so bad that the cops typically wouldn't go in there during the day or at night. So this was their thing, is like, you guys do whatever you want to do, and then really early in the morning we'll take visible bodies off. And like, I remember they said there were nights or
interesting
mornings.
Second life for a bread truck.
Right.
Ooh.
And like,
my friends repurposed one into a gamer truck. That's very different.
Very
different from.
And those are awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
When I was in fundraising, like if we were really like trying to get kids to sell a lot of stuff in schools, you would offer like, whichever class sells the most, you're going to get an hour in the game truck. And dude, that was cool.
Yeah, birthday parties, everything else. It's a good idea. There was a man in our town that was selling ambulances. I'm not sure why he had several of them, but my nephew bought one because it was only $4,000 or $5,000, and it ran. It was. So he was coming to our shop. He wanted to show it to my husband, who has a mechanic shop, which I never thought was spectacular until you just described the mechanic shop. But he's driving down the road, and I hear sirens because I work at home. And now he was getting closer, turned to come down the driveway, and my husband called from the shop to say, "Hey, don't worry, that's just." And that's my nephew. He just bought it, and he was letting me know not to be concerned about this approaching sirens because our driveway is half a mile long and it's private, so there's no other reason they'd be coming. Anyhow, he is driving so fast because he's joking. He pulls up, and then we're all back there laughing at this ambulance purchase. And what could you do? You can make an ice cream truck, or a bookmobile, like a mobile library. Like there's so many different. Creative Uber, or one of those things where you drunk people stop in and you just hit them with an IV and put them back on the streets in Vegas or whatever. Like there's so many ways to repurpose an ambulance.
Nearly endless opportunities.
Yeah. The party bus was a good one because you can clean an ambulance so easily. Like you just turn a water hose to it. Everything back there is just
smart.
Yeah.
So
What Tim did not do when he called to tell me, "Don't worry, it's just our nephew," he did not call the neighbors across the street.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they're giggling at the shop. I go back to work. This was like a cloudy, kind of a cloudy, overcast day. So they were not working away. They were just around the shop cleaning up. So they had pushed a lot of stuff into a pile, and they were burning it, a huge burn pile behind the shop. So the neighbors hear the sirens, and they're elderly. It's this gentle, sweet couple. Aww. And they see a huge plume of smoke coming from behind the shop, and then this like pedal to the metal ambulance speeding down a driveway with sirens. They were so panicked. Like, throw their clothes on. I think one of them tripped. He stood up to put his pants on and tripped putting them on and fell. And this like elderly neighbor falling, trying to get his clothes on so he could get in the vehicle and get to our house fast enough to check on us. And they pull up and they are crying before they even get out of their vehicle.
Oh no!
And then Tim's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. No, it was just."
Okay. By the way, this is the classic example of how and why compelling conspiracy theories get started. You have actual smoke coming from a fire.
Yes.
Okay, right. But in real life, it was intentional.
A controlled burn.
Right,
yes.
Right, okay. But from just over the hedge, you don't know that. And then, in this crazy coincidence, you've got a funny nephew who buys a $4,000 ambulance and is now like pranking you guys, who at the same time. Anyways, this is how I've realized this is how like a lot of great conspiracy theories come, because the idea, there's this saying that there's no such thing as coincidences. I beg to differ. I'm not saying everything's a coincidence, but I'm saying anybody when you hear a never, be very careful.
Yeah.
Anyways,
no, it was an unfortunate fact pattern, and the neighbors were relieved to know, but it took them several minutes to decompress.
Yeah.
And figure everything's okay, and then kind of go back home.
Man. Well, and the poor guy fell. He probably needed a real ambulance after falling and tripping over trying to get in his pants fast
Give
enough.
him a ride,
Give
Jerry.
him a ride. Hello, lovely friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And it would mean the world if you would tell other people about this podcast and maybe even spam your social media accounts with just how much you're enjoying it. If you are, of course. Also, commenting and rating us on whatever platform you're downloading or streaming from is incredibly helpful to a little startup podcast like this one. On the other hand, if you are dissatisfied with your listening experience, please leave all of that hate on someone else's podcast. Just maybe to confuse them a little bit, right? But most of all, we hope you keep looking up and looking for the sunny side of life.